This is 1000 ants in the wild, and I've seen them do some crazy things. Like in this video where they've built a boat out of their bodies to survive a flood. Or in this one where they've built a 5-star dangling bridge out of their bodies to attack a wasp nest. And this is 1000 ants that I've got in captivity. Which made me wonder, if I put my 1000 ants into obstacle courses, will they do similar things to complete them, or are my ants doomed to fail? Bro, these ants are so dumb. So I've devised a plan out of 4 different obstacle courses, going from easy to medium to extremely hard, just to test how well are these ants adapted to different things. And well, let's just start with the easy obstacle first. The idea is simple. We place a few juicy protein-packed insects at the bottom of an enclosure, cover them up with soil, and then add the ants. If the ants dig through the soil and reach the food, they successfully beat the obstacle. However, we're talking about 1000 ants digging, and that requires a big enclosure, whereas I only have a small ant farm, so we're gonna have to destroy it and rebuild a bigger and better version of it. So I've written down the dimensions and well, tried my best to replicate the humongous size of the ant farm I'm planning on building, meaning we can now head to the plexiglass company, where I'm getting the materials for the ant farm. And actually we went back because it was kind of hard to cut on our own, so we decided to let the workers do the magic. Not only that, but we also managed to get everything for the other courses as well. Finally, with all of the cutting done, it was time to load everything into our car and drive back home safely. Whee! And just like that, we have all of the materials ready. And if you're wondering why the material looks brown, it's actually not. It's a protective layer which upon removing reveals a clear plexiglass sheet. And well, I'm definitely not unwrapping all of this on my own. So for that reason, I had to call in some help from my cousin Frog. What's up, my ribbit? What's up? Oh, Shrek. No. We don't need your help. We don't need your help, Shrek. We don't need your help. Just like that, powered by friendship, we peeled off the protective layer from the plexiglass without any struggle and without fighting even once. Okay, now that everything is ready for the first obstacle, it's time to glue it up. And so the gluing process began, from one side to the other, to then gluing the other side of the wall to the main body. And for the people wondering, we're actually using super glue to do this. So while the main body is drying, we decided to glue the upper part of the obstacle. And that's when we realized the design of this farm had no aeration holes at all. But I came up with a solution to fix it. All we have to do is drill a couple of holes into the roof side 1 and 2. Just like that, the problem was easily solved. We drilled a bunch of holes on one side of the roof and then did the same thing on the other side as well. We also ended up drilling a bigger hole that I forgot to mention, and that hole will be used to connect a tube, which later on we're gonna use to move the ants from one obstacle to the other. Anyway, back to work. Just a couple of glue swipes here and there, a bit of cleaning up, then a bit of taping the first and the second tube hole, and the enclosure for the first obstacle is finally complete, which means we can now start the first obstacle. I started by throwing in a bunch of mealworms into the farm, which looked insane because they're still alive and moving. Then we had to cover them up with a whole bunch of dirt, and don't you worry guys, the mealworms are fine, they're just chilling at the bottom of the enclosure. But yeah, all the ants have to do to complete this obstacle is just dig the tunnels and find the food. And later that night, the humongous mealworm actually dug up a hole to live in. So with everything ready, we can drop in the 1000 ants into the first obstacle. Let's do this, boys. Oh, that is satisfying. That is so satisfying. Oh yeah. And I mean, there's definitely more than 1000 ants in there. Look at that big swarm of ants. And just in a couple of minutes, you can see they scattered around a lot. And if you look from this angle, you can probably see that there's more ants than this obstacle can handle. And it's only a matter of time before these ants start digging. So I quickly set up a time lapse. And for the next 10 hours, the ants, well, didn't do a lot. They did move a little bit of dirt, but not nearly enough to reach the bait. And I think the main issue is the strong light. So let's just try and turn it off and see what the ants will do next.
3 hours later.
Oh yeah, look at that! Look at that, guys! The ants are already digging the tunnels. Let's go! So it was actually the lights. And if you look closely, you can probably find some ants like picking up the dirt and trying to pull them up. And just as Real Me said, you can witness one of the ants successfully picking up a rock and trying to pull it out of the tunnels. And my only guess would be is that it's a tiring process, but that's the only way the ants would reach the food. So I guess now that we know that the ants are actually working, we can just turn off the lights again and give them some more time.
1 eternity later.
This time, the ants made a lot of progress. And just in a couple of hours, there's a lot of new tunnels, which almost reached the mealworm. So we're gonna turn off the lights and give them more time. And within a couple of hours, the ants had tunnels everywhere. And after digging all of these tunnels, I'm pretty sure they're exhausted. So it's time we give them a piece of sugar-coated cotton, which in nature ants use to regain strength for their day-to-day activities. And I obviously had to give them a bit of that for the challenges coming up next. Okay, I just noticed something. Very cool. If I just turn the ant farm all the way around and locate this tiny little chamber, we can actually see that the ants completed the obstacle. That's right. After looking even closer, I managed to find another mealworm. Okay, yeah, so although the ants have completed the first obstacle, I still want to see them devour the big mealworm. Look at that, it's still moving. So let's just give them a bit more time and see what happens. Well, we definitely missed the chance to see them devour the big mealworm. However, I did capture the ants moving one of the small ones into the upper part of the farm, which was quite fascinating. And with the first obstacle completed, we can now move on to the obstacle number 2, with the idea of this obstacle being very simple. At the top, we're gonna have a platform that we are going to be directly connecting to the colony's nest. Then at the bottom, they're gonna have 3 different food choices. And all the ants have to do is grab the food and move it up the thread, then through the tube all the way to the ant's nest. So will the ants beat gravity and succeed, or will they fail miserably? Bro, these are dead ants. What? But before we get to that, if you're watching this video in the first couple of months of its release, you still have a chance to subscribe before we hit 1 million subscribers. You see, ever since we were kids, my cousin and I have always dreamed of doing this together. So if you want to help us in making our childhood dream come true, please consider subscribing. It would really mean a lot to us. Now back to the second obstacle, we're gonna have to connect the enclosure to the nest. We did that using a transparent tube secured with a bit of hot glue, and within minutes of attaching it, the first ants began entering the obstacle. These ants are worker ants. Their main role is to explore the world and search for as much food as possible. And soon enough, our first worker ant, Mike, figured out a way to get down to where we placed the good stuff. And although Mike didn't seem very interested in it, he continued exploring the enclosure and then went back to the nest to call the other ants. Not too long after that, more ants started appearing on the platform, some of which were still trying to find their way down to where we had the food. Just like that, more and more ants kept entering the obstacle, but strangely, none of them acted the way I expected they would. And since it was already late, we covered the setup with mesh and went to sleep. And this is what we have after 10 hours of sleeping. The ants ate a bit of the food, moved it around a tiny bit, but none of it entered the colony, which is quite weird. But the biggest question is, why did I find that many ants inside of the obstacle completely dead? And a lot of the ants are actually decapitated, which is even weirder. So I had to quickly Google why are my ants dying to try and save the rest of the colony before it's too late, and as it turns out, it was the baby powder all along. It sticks to the ants and blocks their airflow, but that mainly happens when the ant barrier is too thick. So we quickly had to close off the entrance to the obstacle, and then we started cleaning it. Obviously that means removing every single thing that was in it. So with the enclosure completely clean, we can redo the obstacle. So first of all, this powder is way too thick, and this is what it should look like. So with the new information we now know, we applied a very thin layer of baby powder, which will hopefully prevent the ants from dying. We also decided to add another piece of plexiglass to further guarantee the ants can't escape, since the edge of the enclosure was way too close to the tube. Then we also decided to add some sand so that it replicates a desert biome and feels more natural for the ants. So with the terrain completely ready, we dropped in the first piece of protein alongside the infamous mealworm that we then chopped up into smaller pieces so that the ants can pick them up. And finally, we switched the real fruits with bottle caps filled with sugar water, meaning the second obstacle is now ready for the ants, so let's release them. And just like that, round 2 of the obstacle begins. And boy oh boy did the ants enjoy the new obstacle. As they already knew how to climb down, a lot of them did. But then some were trying to then escape by climbing the walls for no reason, since others were already roaming near the food, and the smarter ones even discovered that there is water filled with sugar, which is a great indicator that the ants are enjoying the obstacle. But then this happened. I mean, look at that. The ant is literally drowning itself in this juice. Like, I don't even understand why it's doing that, but it's enjoying the water so much that it's even ready to die die for it. On another note, please leave a comment on what is actually moving near the mouth, because I have no idea, but I'm so interested. And finally, we had some action happening around the food. And I was right to say that, because shortly after that, I actually saw the ant eating, which is not exactly what I wanted to see, but that means the ants are accepting this as food. And maybe if we wait long enough, the ants will start moving these pieces back to the nest. So all we now have to do is just wait. But we didn't have to wait that long, because right after that I saw the ants munching down on the mealworm, which personally I think the ants will start moving first. However, I was wrong, because this is the first ant I saw moving something. Though it did end up in the bottle cap and somehow I think it got stuck, so I'm guessing the ant just gave up and left it there. So I refilled the bottle caps and gave the ants more time. And I finally noticed something very unexpected. If you look close enough at the ant's abdomen, you can see that it's filling up with water. And once the ant was done drinking, it was blatantly obvious that the ant had something in mind. And I think it was telling the other ants that it has food, because shortly after that, the ant was already climbing the thread, and it was doing so without any hesitation. Then it entered the tube, where it was slowly but surely moving through it, at which point I saw the magic happening. It was sharing the sugar water with one of the other ants, which basically means that the ants weren't actually just drinking the water, they were delivering it to the colony, meaning the ants secretly completed the second obstacle, and we can now move on to obstacle number 3. Eat or die. That's right, the third obstacle is all about pathfinding and while figuring out which way leads to food and which route should definitely be avoided. So first of all, the ants will have to find the entrance to the obstacle, which we are going to later on cover with sand, making it quite difficult to locate. But then once they enter it, they will have to climb against gravity in a complete circular motion. Right after they're done with that, they go through a long tunnel leading into a chamber of choice, and that's where the fun begins. After picking a path, they will either meet their demise or they will enjoy a humongous sugar-packed meal. So what will it be? Well, let's find out. Yoink! This right there is the first explorer ant. And I kid you not, it only took 3 seconds for the ant to come so close to the entrance and completely miss it. But luckily for us, there was another ant close to the tube. Nah, you're kidding me. What is this? What? Yeah, the ant just decided to live its own life and do its own things for no apparent reason. But whatever, I'm sure another ant will stumble upon the entrance at some point. That's what I'm talking about. Look at that. The ant finally... Oh my. Well, I guess we're gonna have to wait for the ants to feel safer to explore the terrain. And this should do the job. We have a bunch of ants exploring the praying mantis, and we have the same amount trying to break into the treasury. But the only way the ants would get the food is by entering the obstacle. And this is the moment we've all been waiting for. One of the ants is finally gonna enter the tube. Or so I thought. Because right after spending a couple of minutes looking into it, it decided not to go in. But luckily for us, Bob came to save the day. Because Bob was different. He was the first ant to risk it and start the obstacle. And after chilling in the tube for a couple of seconds, he continued his journey of trying to reach the food. And just like that, he was done with the vertical loop part of the obstacle. He now has to go through the tunnel underground leading to the chamber of choice. But Bob kept pushing through the obstacle as if his life depended on it, and in a sense, it actually did. However, it all comes down to what Bob decides to choose, whether it be the path of salvation or the road to destruction. And in that singular moment, Bob surrendered himself to fate. The uncertainty was gone, and all that remained was the outcome of the path he dared to take. But fate can be strangely merciful. As danger stood towering above him, Bob did not run, he did not hesitate. Step by step, he marched forward, as if he couldn't even see the monster waiting before him. Every second felt like it could be his last. One sudden movement, one wrong step, and the journey would be over. But somehow, Bob kept walking. No panic, no hesitation, no sign that he understood how close he truly was. It was almost as if Bob had convinced himself that the universe had chosen him for something greater. And he was right to think so. Somehow he survived the deadly praying mantis as if it was nothing and just simply charged right back to the chamber of choice, where he now knows which path actually leads to the food, meaning Bob had single-handedly completed the third obstacle, leaving us with no other choice than to move on to the final obstacle of the video, one that I tried making nearly impossible to complete. However, I kept it simple. we're going to be blocking the ants with a sheet of mesh to see whether the ants will be able to break through it or if this will finally be the obstacle to stop them. And to do that, we're gonna have to close off the only exit from the nest. And then to motivate the ants, we're gonna be giving them a humongous pile of strawberries. So all they have to do to complete the obstacle is eat through the mesh and gain the freedom to roam around, eventually finding the big piece of strawberries we gave them. So can they do it? Well, let's find out. And within just a couple of minutes, our first explorer ant was already checking out the new obstacle. To my surprise, it didn't even take that long before the ant realized the only way through was by cutting into the mesh. But while I waited for something exciting to happen, more and more ants kept entering the obstacle, most of which inspected the barrier for a couple of seconds before turning around and going back straight to the nest, almost as if they accepted that escaping was impossible. Still, I felt like this was just a waiting game. Given enough time, surely they'd figure something out. And if you watch closely, you can actually see them testing different approaches, and the longer I watched, the more I noticed each ant chewing in a slightly different way, almost like every single one of them was experimenting with its own strategy. It's also crazy how much detail you can see in their mouths. They look completely alien up close. Then I finally spotted it. A tiny piece of mesh had been chewed away. It wasn't nearly enough to let the ants through, but it was proof they were actually making progress. Then I noticed another tiny bit of success, and then another. Eventually, I left the obstacle with what felt like thousands of ants all working together on the same impossible task. And when I came back later, they were everywhere. Somehow, they'd actually broken through and reached the other side. I even found one of them standing on top of the strawberries as if it was admiring the reward. But when I looked back at the mesh itself, I noticed something unexpected. Even though the ants could already pass through, some of them were still cutting away at the barrier, and you can actually see that they chewed off a lot of it. Once again, the ants proved me wrong and completed the final obstacle. So next time, we're gonna have to come up with something even harder.